she said it in front of the neighbors. My father achieved nothing in life just like that, over pot roast and red wine, like I wasn't even sitting there. Then she went home and listed my workshop as Junkland, called it a retirement plan. I built that shop with my bare hands. It's where I taught her to hold a hammer. Now she's trying to declare me senile and sell it for profit. Beat. But what she didn't know? The mayor had a different plan. One that ends with my name in bronzes and hers in shame. Because this time I wasn't handing over my legacy without a fight. And when that curtain dropped, nobody looked at her again. My name is Samuel Whitaker, and I'm 75 years old. Each morning, I still wake before dawn to the hiss of my old percolator, pulling on work boots that carry decades of cedar shavings into my carpentry workshop. My daughter Catherine, who married real estate developer James Morton, measures a man's worth by his mansion's square footage and the luxury cars in his driveway. The workshop benches hold memories of every home I've built, every veteran's ramp I've installed, and every struggling tradesman I've employed. Like Bill Mason, the retired stoneworker who still brings me coffee every Thursday. Mayor Thompson keeps a letter in his desk about the time I rebuilt the town hall's roof at cost during the recession. Most folks around here remember who helped them weather hard times, but let me start from the beginning. That Sunday started like any other. The scent of pot roast drifting through the house I'd remodeled back when Catherine was still in high school. I remember installing those kitchen cabinets myself, matching the grain patterns so carefully they flowed like water from door to door. Even the window trim above the sink came from a single maple board I'd been saving for something special. You know how some moments stick in your mind like splinters? This was one of those nights. I sat at the head of the table, where I'd always sat, listening to the gentle clink of silverware and casual conversation. The Hendersons from next door had joined us, good people who'd had me build their back deck last summer. The steam from the roast made everything feel warm and familiar right up until it wasn't. Catherine stood, wineglass raised, wearing that pearl necklace James had bought her for their anniversary. "I'd like to make a toast," she said, her voice carrying that artificial sweetness she'd picked up since moving to the fancy side of town. "To my father, a good man who achieved nothing in life." The words hit like a misplaced hammer strike, sending shock straight through my bones. The Hendersons suddenly found their plates fascinating, pushing peas around with their forks. James, that snake of a son-in-law, didn't even try to hide his smirk. Have you ever felt your whole world tilt sideways in a single breath? Something wooden and tight formed in my chest, like a knot in old oak that no plane could smooth away. The roast turned to sawdust in my mouth. I set my napkin down, the same way I'd taught Catherine to do when she was little, and stood up without a word. Dignity's funny that way. Sometimes it's loudest when you're quietest. The walk to my front door felt like crossing a bridge that was burning behind me. My phone sat silent in my pocket, though I kept checking it, hoping maybe she'd call to apologize, to say it was all some terrible joke. But there was only silence, the kind that rings in your ears like a saw blade spinning down. I passed my workshop on the way out, its door still hanging perfectly true after 30 years. I'd planned that door by hand, testing it again and again until it closed with just the right kind of soft click. Now it looked back at me like a stranger. Everything I'd built, every piece of wood I'd shaped with these hands suddenly felt different, wrong somehow. That night, lying in bed, I stared up at the rafters I'd raised decades ago. They used to feel like the ribs of something living, something that sheltered and protected. Now they loomed over me like questions I couldn't answer. Sleep didn't come easy, with Catherine's words echoing in my head like footsteps in an empty house. When dawn finally crept through my window, that insult was still there, fresh as wet paint. I made my coffee stronger than usual, watching the sunrise paint shadows across my kitchen floor. The house felt borrowed somehow, like I was just passing through a place that used to be mine. I decided right there, stirring my coffee with the spoon Catherine had given me one Father's Day, that I'd talk to her first thing. No anger, no accusations, just a father asking his daughter why she chose to humiliate him in front of neighbors who'd known us both for years. Why she couldn't have been honest with me in private if she had something to say. But sitting there in my kitchen, watching the morning light catch on those carefully matched cabinet doors, I already knew this wasn't just about one cruel toast. This was something that had been building, like dry rot in a foundation, invisible until the whole structure starts to sway. The next morning my coffee tasted like copper and regret. You ever notice how trouble comes in waves? Like when you find one loose shingle, there's always 3 more waiting to leak. I headed out to my workshop early, hoping the smell of cedar and the routine of checking my tools would settle my mind. That's when I saw it, a laminated sheet of paper stabbed into my fence post with a realtor's pin, the kind of aggressive marketing that makes you wonder who gave permission. Prime parcel cash offers only, it screamed in bold letters. My eyes caught on the description below. Current junk land ideal for luxury development. Junk land. My stomach clenched like I'd swallowed a handful of nails. The contact number at the bottom. James Warren Real Estate. My son-in-law's office. The paper crumpled in my fist as I marched over to Catherine's house. She lived in the new development now, where every lawn looked like it came from the same catalogue. I found her in the driveway, directing 2 delivery guys who were setting up some fancy outdoor furniture, the kind with cushions that cost more than my first truck. "Catherine," I called out, holding up the crushed listing. "Want to explain this?" She barely glanced my way, more interested in positioning a glass-topped table just so. "Oh, good. You found it. Saves me a conversation." "Saves you a conversation?" The words came out rough as unsanded wood. "That's my workshop you're selling. My property. Daddy," she sighed, finally turning to face me. She had that look, the one she'd get when explaining something to a child. "It's a retirement plan. That land is worth 3 times what you're using it for. We're just being practical." "Practical?" I stepped closer, my voice dropping low. "You listed my life's work as junk land, without even talking to me." She waved off my words like smoke. "Oh please, it's just sentimental wood and rusty tools. There are better uses for prime real estate than storing your memories." The delivery guys were pretending not to listen, adjusting cushions that didn't need adjusting. I could feel my face burning, but kept my voice steady. "Take down the listing, today, before sunset." That's when she laughed. Actually laughed, and patted my arm like I was some doddering old fool. "Daddy, this is how things work now. Adult children handle these matters. It's for your own good, my own good." I pulled back from her touch. "You don't get to decide that. Actually, I do." She turned back to her new furniture, running her hand along the gleaming metal frame. "James already has interested buyers. Don't make this difficult." I left without another word, my boots heavy on her perfect concrete driveway. Back home, I went straight to my filing cabinet, the one I built from cherry wood when Catherine was still in pigtails. Every receipt, every deed, every permit from 40 years of honest work. I laid them out on my kitchen table like armor. The afternoon sun was painting long shadows when I heard the mailbox lid click. Probably more bills or junk mail, but I needed the distraction. Instead, I found a thick manila envelope with the mayor's seal, marked Urgent Centennial in red letters. I stood there in my driveway, that heavy envelope in my trembling hands, wondering what the town could possibly want with an old carpenter now. After everything that had happened in the last 24 hours, could anything in this envelope still matter? "Mr. Whitaker," my neighbor Bill called over the fence, probably noticing me frozen there like a statue. "Everything okay?" I nodded slowly, turning the envelope over in my hands. "Guess I'm about to find out." Have you ever noticed how time moves differently when you're waiting on something? Like watching glue dry on a joint versus racing to finish before the rain hits. That next morning felt like both, crawling and rushing all at once. I arrived early at Town Hall, my work boots echoing against the polished floor. The corridor walls were lined with varnished photos of town events, harvest parades, centennial celebrations, groundbreaking ceremonies. Made me think of all the porches and gazebos I'd built for those same gatherings over the years. Mayor Caldwell met me at his office door with a firm handshake. He hadn't changed much since I'd fixed his mother's roof during that nasty storm back in '98, still had that wrestler's build and those kind eyes that could read trouble like a blueprint. "Sam," he said, gesturing me to a chair, "thanks for coming in so quickly." He settled behind his desk, hands folded like he was about to deliver either very good or very bad news. "You've been on my mind lately." I shifted in my seat. "That's so? You remember the Martinez family? The veteran who lost both legs in Desert Storm?" "Course I do. Built them that wheelchair ramp back in, must have been 2003. 2002, he corrected, pulling out a folder. And the Wilsons' emergency roof repair after that ice storm. The community center's new steps when we couldn't afford a contractor. My face warmed. Just doing what needed doing. That's exactly my point, Sam. He leaned forward. For 40 years you've been quietly holding this town together, one nail at a time. The council's been planning something special for our centennial celebration. 6 weeks from now. 6 weeks. The number hit me like a hammer strike. That's how long I needed to hold everything together. We want to mount a bronze plaque, he continued, honoring your service to the community. And we'd like you to say a few words. At the ceremony, the mayor's office suddenly felt too warm. A plaque, public recognition, the kind of thing that makes selling property politically complicated. I cleared my throat, that's mighty kind, but there might be some family complications. Mayor Caldwell's expression shifted slightly. I've heard whispers. Your daughter and James Warren, they're trying to sell my workshop. Without permission. The words tasted bitter. Calling it Junkland. He nodded slowly. All the more reason to make this official, don't you think? Hard to dismiss property that the town's formally recognizing. Hope flickered like a match strike. When exactly is this ceremony? August 15th, 6 weeks from Sunday. He pulled out some papers. We just need your permission for the plaque and... A knock at the door interrupted us. His secretary poked her head in. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, but there's an urgent courier delivery for Mr. Whitaker. The envelope was thick, legal-sized, with a law firm's letterhead. My fingers felt wooden as I opened it right there in the mayor's office. The words jumped out like splinters. Question of competency, safety concerns, workshop hazards. Emergency hearing requested. Mayor Caldwell watched my face. Bad news. My daughter's lawyers. I tried to keep my voice steady. They're challenging my competency, trying to take control before... I gestured at his paperwork. Before the ceremony makes it harder, he finished. How solid is your paperwork? Got every deed, permit, and inspection report since '82. I managed a thin smile. Doctor gave me a clean bill of health last month too, been stacking evidence like lumber before a storm. He stood up, jaw set. Then let's make this official. He pushed the plaque permission forms across his desk. Sign here, Sam. Let's give them something else to think about. I picked up his pen, feeling its weight like a hammer in my hand. 6 weeks suddenly felt like 6 minutes. Would the ceremony arrive before they stripped away everything? My signature looked steady enough on the paper, but my hand shook when I set the pen down. Ever spread out your whole life on a kitchen table? That's what I did that night. Every deed, permit, and inspection report laid out like a timeline of timber and nails. The percolator hummed in the background while I fed papers through my ancient copier, one sheet at a time. You know the kind. Those reliable old workhorses that never quite die. The clock on the wall kept clicking away, reminding me how time was slipping through my fingers like sawdust. Midnight crept closer as I organized everything into 3 neat stacks. Originals, copies for my lawyer and copies for the court. My hand cramped from initialing each page, but I made sure every signature was as clean as a plumb line. I'd already called Dr. Peterson's office and sweet-talked his receptionist into squeezing me in first thing tomorrow. Just a quick cognitive check, I told her, trying to keep my voice light. Nothing serious, but we both knew better. In these cases, everything's serious. The smell of coffee, grounds, and paper dust filled my kitchen, bringing back memories of late nights sketching designs at this same table, my daughter coloring beside me while I worked out measurements. Now those same blueprints were evidence I needed to prove I wasn't losing my mind. Morning came too quick. Dr. Peterson's evaluation was thorough. Memory tests, coordination checks, the works. He'd known me 30 years, seen me through 2 shoulder surgeries from lifting too many beams alone. Sam, he said, shaking his head as he wrote his report, you're sharper than half my 40-year-old patients. But the real test came that afternoon when the court officer showed up, Ms. Bradley, clipboard in hand, heels clicking on my workshop floor. She was professional enough, but I could see judgment in her eyes as she catalogued every tool, every workbench, every pile of seasoned wood. And these treated lumber, scraps? She pointed to my neat stacks of flame-retardant wood. Are they a fire hazard? No, ma'am. I kept my voice steady. That's specialty timber, treated to resist fire. Been storing it exactly to code for 30 years. I handed her my material safety certificates. Feel free to check with the fire marshal. She made notes, lots of notes, while I signed form after form with deliberate care. No shaking, no rushing, every signature as straight as a steel ruler. That's when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. My daughter's SUV pulled up, James right beside her in his pressed shirt and shiny shoes. Neither spoke to me as they circled the yard, him taking photos with his phone, while she pointed out what they called problems. "Look at that wiring," he whispered, loud enough for me to hear. "Complete code violation. And these chemical storage containers? Insurance nightmare waiting to happen." They were looking at my organizing shelves, the ones I'd built to every OSHA specification, with proper ventilation and fire-safe cabinets. But facts didn't matter now. They were building their case, piece by piece. Ms. Bradley watched it all, making more notes. Before she left, she handed me a court notice. "Preliminary hearing in 2 weeks," she said, not unkindly. "The judge may consider temporary conservatorship if these concerns aren't addressed." 2 weeks. That put us at the end of July, still weeks before the ceremony. My throat felt like it was full of sawdust. The sun was setting when they finally left. I stood at my workshop door, running through my mental checklist one last time before locking up. The hasp felt cool under my palm as I clicked the padlock shut. 40 years of work, all secured by one piece of steel. Motion lights flooded the yard as cars pulled away, their tires crunching on gravel. Then nothing but cricket song and questions hanging in the twilight air. How do you prove you're still yourself? How do you fight people who think they're saving you from yourself? And what happens when the ones trying to break you down are the same ones you spent a lifetime building things for? I woke up while it was still dark, my mind already spinning like a warped saw blade. The house felt too big, too quiet. You know that feeling when everything you built starts looking like kindling? The workshop keychain sat heavy on my kitchen counter, next to a stack of papers I'd been reviewing until midnight. Maybe if I just handed it all over, the noise would stop. The fighting, the court dates, the whispers about my sanity, all of it could end with one signature. I made coffee, but it tasted like giving up. 40 years of measuring twice and cutting once, and here I was, ready to fold like a cheap ruler. The morning sun hadn't even cleared the trees when the knock came. Bill Mercer stood on my porch, a cardboard box tucked under one arm. His scarred hands, Mason's hands, gripped the box like it held gold. "Got a minute, Sam?" Those hands took me back 15 years, to when the housing crash hit and work dried up. Bill had come to me then, pride bent but not broken, asking if I needed help with winter repairs. I'd stretched every job I could find into two-man work until spring came, and building picked up again. "Coffee's hot," I said, holding the door. He set the box on my kitchen table and started pulling out papers. "Remember Thompson's Hardware, the flood of '98? He spread out yellowed invoices and photos. "You rebuilt their storage room in 3 days so they wouldn't lose inventory. Got half the trades in town to pitch in." I picked up a photo showing younger versions of ourselves, covered in mud but grinning. "Thompson's boy still runs that place." "Exactly." Bill tapped the table. "And he signed this yesterday." He handed me a notarized statement describing how I'd saved their family business. "Got 15 more just like it. Men you helped, families you kept warm, veterans whose houses you fixed when they couldn't pay full price." The defeat in my coffee started tasting more like determination. "Bill, don't thank me yet." He pulled out a legal pad. "We're going to document every job, every emergency call, every payment plan you offered when times were tough. Dates, photos, invoices, proof you're still the same man who built half this town's additions and all of its trust." For the next hour, we drafted a battle plan. Bill would handle the VFW hall arrangements for gathering testimonies. I'd dig through my records for photos showing recent work, clear evidence of steady hands and sharp mind. Around 10, I called the mayor's office about submitting supporting documents for the ceremony. The secretary put me straight through to Caldwell himself. "Sam," he said, his voice tight, "I was about to call you. There's something you should know." He paused and I heard papers shuffling. "I'm getting pressure to cancel your recognition at the Centennial." My grip tightened on the phone. "What kind of pressure?" "The kind that comes with checkbooks and political donations," he said quietly. "Someone's working hard to make this go away." Bill watched my face as I listened. "Any idea who?" I asked, though my gut already knew. Can't say for certain, Caldwell replied, but it's connected to real estate interests. They're claiming it would be inappropriate given your current situation. I thanked him and hung up, then told Bill about the call. He just nodded like another piece of a puzzle had fallen into place. You hear that grinding sound? I asked him. What grinding sound? The gears turning behind closed doors. Somebody's paying good money to erase a simple plaque. I looked at the evidence spread across my table, decades of honest work and fair deals laid out in paper and ink. Question is, who stands to gain if I'm just a confused old man with worthless property? Bill started gathering the affidavits back into their folder. Then we better make sure these reach the right people before those gears finish turning. The next morning, Bill pulled up in his old pickup before 8. The bed was loaded with empty file boxes, and he had that look masons get when they're ready to lay a foundation. Steady, methodical, one stone at a time. Ready to work? He asked, handing me a fresh thermos of coffee. Main Street was just waking up when we started at Thompson's Hardware. The smell of sawdust and metal filings took me back to countless supply runs, each shelf holding memories of projects past. Young Thompson, well, not so young anymore, had the statement ready, 3 pages thick with photos attached. Remember that flood? He pointed to a water line still visible on the back wall, 3 feet deep, and you had us dried out and restocked in 72 hours. Dad never forgot that. The morning unfolded like that, door to door, memory by memory. The bakery where I'd rebuilt display cases after a truck jumped the curb. The flower shop whose walk-in cooler I'd repaired one Christmas Eve. Each stop added papers to our boxes, filled with what Bill called character witnesses. You know that feeling when you've been looking at a puzzle all wrong, then suddenly the pattern emerges. That's how it felt watching these people dig through their files, pull out old invoices, share that evening. I sat in the back row of the council chamber, my weathered hands folded over the file folder in my lap. Bill slouched beside me, pretending to scroll through his phone while his camera app stayed ready. The room smelled like floor wax and stale coffee, same as it had 30 years ago when I'd installed the oak wainscoting along these walls. Item 7, maintenance allocations, droned Council Secretary Peters, her voice echoing off the high ceiling. Review of discretionary spending. I nearly missed it. Would have, if Bill hadn't nudged my arm. There was my son-in-law, Glenn, sliding into a seat near the front, wearing that $1,000 suit that always reminded me of snake oil salesmen. He caught Councilman. Reeves's eye gave a slight nod. You seeing this? Bill whispered, his thumb moving over his phone screen. I was. Reeves left his chair, casual as could be, and met Glenn by the water cooler. Their heads bent close, Glenn's hand gesturing small circles like he was counting something out. Money has its own body language, I found. After 40 years watching men haggle over lumber prices, you learn to read it. Bill's camera made tiny clicking sounds. Got the timestamp, he muttered. 8:42 p.m., right when they're discussing the centennial budget. The clerk, Sarah, whose front porch I'd rebuilt after that tornado in '98, caught my eye from her desk. She tilted her head toward a fresh stack of papers, her expression worried. During the next break, I ambled over like I was just stretching my legs. Sam, she whispered, sliding a document half hidden under others. They've added a motion for tomorrow. Fiscal prudence review targeting all commemorative expenses, including centennial events. My stomach clenched. Convenient timing. There's more, she said. I processed a property filing this morning. Option to purchase on your workshop land. Contingent on... She paused, choosing her words carefully. No encumbrances or civic restrictions. The pieces clicked together like joinery in a well-built cabinet. A plaque. On that wall would be more than recognition. It'd be a civic designation. Hard to flip property that's part of the town's historical record. No wonder Glenn wanted the ceremony killed. I need copies of everything between Reeves and Glenn, I said. Official communications, meeting minutes, property records. Sarah nodded. File the request now. I'll expedite it, but... She glanced at the calendar on her desk. 3 business days minimum, maybe 5. I did the math in my head. The competency hearing was in 9 days, the ceremony in 42. But if they passed this motion tomorrow, put it through tonight, I said, pulling out my wallet. I'll pay the rush fee. Bill appeared at my elbow, phone tucked away. Got something interesting, he murmured. Reeves's nephew just started at Glenn's firm. Titles, Special Projects Consultant. Salaries public record. I wrote out the records request in my steadiest hand, making sure every letter was clear as carved pine. Sarah stamped it right there, handed me the receipt with tomorrow's date. "I'll call the second anything comes in," she promised. Walking to our cars after, Bill showed me the photos. Glenn and Reeves time-stamped perfectly against the agenda items. Not proof, not yet, but threads starting to weave together. "They're getting sloppy," Bill said. "Desperate. People usually do." I nodded, thinking of raw lumber turning into something solid and true. How every piece has to be measured twice, cut once, fitted just so. "Thing about corruption," I said, "is it's like bad carpentry. Looks fine from far away, but get close." I pulled out my notebook, added today's details to my growing timeline. The joints always show. "Question is," Bill said, "will the proof arrive in time?" I stared at the manila envelope holding my records request, Sarah's rushed processing stamp still wet on the corner. 3 to 5 days for documents that might save or sink everything I'd built. The hearing would come first, then the ceremony, if it survived tomorrow's vote. Time was becoming like a warped board, hard to work with, impossible to trust. 2 weeks. That's what we had left when I walked into courtroom B with my spine straight as a level. You know that. Smell government buildings get? Like someone's trying to cover decades of worry with fresh polish? That's what hit me first. Bill sat right behind me, thick manila envelope on his lap. My lawyer, Mike Peterson, whose garage I'd rebuilt after that flood in '89, had arranged everything in neat stacks. Medical reports, inspection certificates, client testimonials. Looking at them lined up like that reminded me of setting drawer slides, how you need each piece to glide smooth against the next. "All rise," the bailiff called out, and I stood without using the table for support. Let them see steady hands. My daughter and Glenn sat across the aisle, her in pearls, him in another of those suits that probably cost more than my first truck. The way they watched me, like I was some broken fence post needing removal, made my throat tight. Judge Harrison had eyes like aged cedar, deep-grained, and seeing everything. She started with the medical testimony. Dr. Roberts, who'd known me 20 years, spoke about my recent cognitive tests. "Mr. Whitaker displays above-average recall and decision-making capacity for his age group," he said firmly. "There is no clinical basis for competency concerns." I testified next, walking the judge through my daily routines, safety protocols, and business practices. Showed her photos of my organized workshop. Explained my filing system for contracts and permits. "I've never missed a deadline or failed an inspection," I said. "Every tool has its place, every project its proper documentation. You ever notice how truth sits different in your mouth than excuses? It's got weight, substance." When Bill took the stand, he brought more than just words. He had letters, dozens of them. Mrs. Chen writing about the emergency roof patch during that Christmas storm. Tom Rodriguez describing the wheelchair ramp I built at cost. Widow Patterson's note about finishing her late husband's half-done deck. "I've known Sam 40 years, Bill concluded. His word and his work have always been solid as concrete foundations. Judge Harrison studied the stack of testimonials, then looked at my daughter's lawyer. "Your concerns about safety and competency appear significantly overstated, Counselor. I'm withholding any conservatorship action pending further evidence, if any exists." The relief felt like setting down a heavy beam after a long carry, but we weren't finished. Back home, my answering machine blinked red. Mayor Caldwell's voice crackled through. "Sam, they're pushing hard now. 3 council members claiming budget optics require postponing the centennial ceremony. Need to talk." I was halfway through returning his call when the courier arrived. Rush delivery from the records office. Sarah had come through. Inside that envelope, printed in black and white, was the thread that could unravel everything. An invoice from GRT Consulting LLC, Glenn's initials, I noticed, to a company registered to Councilman Reeves's brother-in-law, dated 1 day before the motion to defer commemorative expenses. "Bill," I said into the phone, "grab your camera. Bring those time-stamped photos from the council meeting. Meet me at Town Hall in 20 minutes. Mayor Caldwell received us in his office, where the afternoon sun slanted across his desk like a spotlight. I laid out the documents one by one. The Shell Company invoice, property records, photos of Glenn with Reeves, the timing of the deferral motion, The mayor's jaw tightened as he studied each page. The muscle along his temple twitched, same look he'd had during that zoning crisis last spring. "This is admissible?" he asked finally. "Public records," Bill confirmed. "Photos in plain sight at public meetings." "They're trying to kill the ceremony to clear the way for a property flip," I said quietly. "The plaque would complicate their plans." Caldwell nodded slowly. "I can proceed with the ceremony," he said. "But Sam, this evidence, it'll have to stand daylight, at a microphone. You ready for that?" I thought of my workshop, of 40 years building things to last, of my daughter's dismissal and Glenn's smirk. "Truth's like good lumber," I said. "It holds weight." Outside, the town clock began striking 6. Bill and I stood under the street lamps, watching shadows stretch across the square. 2 weeks until the ceremony, if it survived. One set of evidence against who knew how many backroom deals. The clock finished its count and fell silent, leaving just the sound of evening traffic and my own heartbeat. Ceremony week hit our town like a holiday. I remember standing at my kitchen window Monday morning, watching volunteers hang those green and gold banners across Main Street. Made me think of all the Christmas garlands I'd helped string up over the years, back when my hands were steadier and heights didn't make my knees complain. You know that feeling when something big is coming and your stomach can't decide between butterflies or lead? That was me all week. Tuesday morning I was out before the birds, just as the sky was turning that pearl grey that makes everything look softer than it is. Had my finest sandpaper with me, 220 grit, smooth as silk. There was this one splinter on the workshop door, right where they'd talked about mounting the plaque. Funny how you notice these little flaws when you're nervous. Just another piece of wood needing attention, I told myself, working the paper in gentle circles. The familiar motion calmed me some, like saying a prayer with my hands. Mayor Caldwell showed up Wednesday for the walkthrough, clipboard tucked under his arm like a shield. We paced the town green together, marking spots for chairs and reviewing the program order. "Sam," he said, pausing near where the podium would stand, "I'd like to reference some specific work you've done. That Thompson emergency repair during the ice storm of '98, the veterans' ramps. Maybe that interest-free payment plan you set up for the Wilson family." My throat got tight. "You sure that's wise?" He nodded slowly. "These aren't just invoices anymore, Sam. They're proof of character." I had to look away for a minute, pretending to study the oak trees along the green. Been doing that a lot lately, finding excuses to turn aside when emotions run high. Thursday brought unwanted visitors. First came my daughter, crawling past in her silver SUV around noon. She had her phone out, recording video of my workshop like it was evidence in a crime scene. "Public embarrassments have consequences, Dad," she called through her open window. Her voice carried that same tone she'd used at that Sunday dinner, sharp as a broken tile. I kept sanding my door frame, steady and smooth. "Plenty of consequences coming," I murmured, but not loud enough for her to hear. Later that afternoon, Glenn showed up with 3 men I'd never seen before, all wearing tailored sport coats that looked too warm for the season. They pretended to discuss traffic patterns and parking zones, but their eyes kept drifting to my property line. "Making sure everything's ready for tomorrow," Glenn called over, fake friendly as painted pine. I noticed he had a fresh haircut, and his shoes were polished mirror bright. Getting ready for his close-up, I supposed. That night I double-checked my evidence folder, the verified invoices showing decades of fair dealing, that consulting payment record that connected too many convenient dots. Bill called around 9 to confirm he'd be positioned by the press area, camera ready. "Got fresh batteries," he assured me. "Won't miss a single expression when the truth hits." Friday morning dawned clear and cool, perfect September weather. I was up with the sun, watching volunteers set up those borrowed folding chairs in neat rows. Someone had polished the brass on every single one until they gleamed like new pennies. By 10 o'clock the town band was tuning up, and people started filling those chairs. I spotted Mrs. Thompson in her Sunday best, and old Mr. Wilson with his cane. Even saw some faces I hadn't seen in years. Folks who'd moved away but came back for this. Bill gave me a slight nod from his spot near the press platform. I patted my jacket pocket, feeling the weight of those documents inside. 40 years of honest work and 1 week of dishonest dealing, all reduced to paper and ink. Councilman Reeves took his seat in the front row just before 11, arms crossed tight over his chest like he was holding something in, or holding something back. The crowd hushed as Mayor Caldwell approached the microphone. There was that familiar pop of the PA system, and then silence, the kind that feels heavy with waiting. I watched him lift the first page of his remarks, and the morning sun caught his wedding ring as he cleared his throat. You ever notice how time slows down right before something big happens? Like when you're about to drop a beam into place, and that half-second stretch feels like an hour. Mayor Caldwell started with the usual ceremony bits, thanking the Centennial Committee, praising the volunteers who'd hung banners and polished chairs, standard stuff that let everyone settle in. I could feel Bill's steady presence near the press area, camera ready. But today, the mayor said, his voice taking on that tone people use when they're about to change the conversation entirely, we're here to recognize the quiet labor that built this town, the kind of work that doesn't make headlines but holds communities together. He looked straight at me then, and I felt my spine straighten like I was facing a level against a post. Samuel Whitaker has served this town for over 40 years, he continued. When the '98 ice storm hit and the Thompsons' roof was giving way, Sam was there at midnight with his tools. When our veterans needed ramps built to get home from the hospital, Sam was there with lumber and labor, often at cost or less. The crowd murmured agreement. I spotted Mrs. Thompson nodding, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. But recently, the mayor's voice hardened like setting concrete, there was an attempt to cancel this recognition. Not for any valid reason, mind you, but for profit masquerading as prudence. Glenn shifted in his chair. I could see sweat starting to darken his collar, despite the cool morning air. The mayor held up a paper that caught the sunlight. I have here a consulting invoice dated last week, from New Horizon Development LLC to Regional Planning Associates. He paused, letting that sink in. New Horizon, as some of you may know, is a shell company registered to Glenn Peterson, Sam's son-in-law. Regional Planning Associates lists Councilman Reeves's nephew as its sole employee. The crowd's murmur turned darker. Glenn suddenly found his expensive shoes fascinating. Next to him, my daughter's face went pale as fresh-cut pine. The payment was processed one day before Councilman Reeves introduced a motion to defer all centennial commemorations, citing budget concerns. Mayor Caldwell's words rang clear as hammer strikes now, a motion that would have conveniently removed any public recognition that might complicate certain real estate dealings. Councilman Reeves's face had gone red as old brick. He started to stand, but two officials in dark suits were already moving toward him from the wings, clipboards in hand. This morning, the mayor continued, I filed a formal ethics complaint with the state board. The evidence packet includes documented attempts to manipulate property values through abuse of council authority. My daughter shot to her feet. This is a family matter, she shouted, but her voice sounded thin and desperate in the morning air. No, Mrs. Peterson, Mayor Caldwell replied, calm as still water. When someone attempts to corrupt public office for private gain, it becomes everyone's matter. He turned slightly, gesturing to the town clerk. If you'd hand me the next page, please, the one detailing the consequences under state statute. I watched the clerk approach with that sheet of paper, and suddenly, all I could think about was something my own father told me years ago. The truth is like good lumber, son. It always shows its real grain under pressure. The mayor took the page, and I could see Glenn starting to crumble, his manicured hands shaking as he loosened his tie. Councilman Reeves was already huddled with those officials, their voices low and serious. My daughter remained standing, but the fight had drained from her posture. She looked lost, like someone who'd just realized they'd soared through the wrong board and couldn't take it back. The mayor cleared his throat, preparing to read what came next, and the whole crowd leaned forward like a single body, waiting to hear how justice would measure this particular cut. The ethics officer moved like someone used to delivering bad news, all quiet purpose and official nods. He touched Councilman Reeves's elbow, and just like that, the man who'd tried to erase my legacy was being led away from his front row seat. You ever watch a powerful person deflate? It's something to see. Reeves's shoulders slumped like a beam that's lost its support, and his face, well, let's just say I've seen fresher color on old varnish. Cameras clicked and whirred, documenting every step. Funny how the same reporters who'd ignored my daughter's competency claims were suddenly very interested in what was happening. I caught Bill's eye and he gave me that slight nod we'd perfected over years of wordless communication across noisy job sites. Then the State Licensing Board liaison, a sharp woman in a charcoal suit, walked straight to Glenn. Her heels clicked against the pavement like a carpenter's pencil marking trouble spots. The paper she handed him might as well have been sandpaper for how he flinched at taking it. "Effective immediately," she announced, loud enough for the front rows to hear. "Your broker's license is suspended pending investigation of ethics violations and conflicts of interest." A gasp rippled through the crowd like wind through autumn leaves. I heard someone whisper, "Serves him right," and another voice adding, "Always knew something was off about that deal." My daughter, and Lord, it hurt to watch this part, tried one last time to save face. She stood up, designer purse clutched like a shield. "This is orchestrated slander," she shouted, scanning the crowd for allies. "My father manipulated all of you with sob stories and favors, but you can't buy the kind of credit that comes from showing up when people need you." Mrs. Thompson, bless her, spoke right up from 3 rows back. "The only manipulation I remember is Sam working through the night to save my roof during that ice storm. Didn't charge me a dime until spring either." Other voices joined in, a chorus of remembered kindnesses. The Martinez family talked about their wheelchair ramp. Old Joe from the hardware store mentioned emergency repairs after the flood of '02. Each memory another nail in the coffin of my daughter's accusations. I watched her face crumple as she realized no one was buying what she was selling. She sank back into her seat, suddenly looking very small in her expensive clothes. Mayor Caldwell tapped the microphone, drawing everyone's attention back. "Samuel Whitaker," he called out, "would you join me up here?" My legs felt heavy as wet lumber as I stood. Bill fell in step beside me, just like he had on countless jobs where we needed each other's strength. The short walk to the podium seemed to take forever, and no time at all. The afternoon sun was hitting the workshop just right, lighting up the cedar siding I'd replaced myself 5 years back. 2 custodians wheeled out what looked like a pedestal, draped in dark blue cloth. They positioned it carefully next to my workshop door, right where I'd imagined it might go. Something was under that cloth, something with edges that caught the light even through the fabric. Bronze, if I had to guess, with beveled corners that promised permanence. The mayor gestured toward the workshop, and I could feel the crowd's attention shift. Whatever was written on that hidden plaque would either seal my vindication or, well, there wasn't really an or. I'd built too many things in my life not to recognize the moment before a project's completion. Bill's hand found my shoulder, steady as a level, reminding me of all those winter jobs we'd weathered together. The cloth rippled slightly in the breeze, teasing at what lay beneath. Mayor Caldwell turned to me, his expression warm but leaving the next moment unspoken. Someone would need to pull that cloth away. Someone would need to reveal whatever words had been cast in bronze. But whose hands would do the honors? The crowd waited, barely breathing, as afternoon light played across the hidden edges of what looked to be my final testament in this town I'd helped build, one nail at a time. Mayor Caldwell's fingers closed around the presentation cord, and he cleared his throat. "Today," he announced, "we honor not just service, but teach a lesson about values that can't be bought." My heart hammered against my ribs as he continued. "Before we reveal this plaque, let the record show that Mr. Glenn Peterson's real estate license suspension will trigger an formal investigation." He nodded to the liaison, who stepped forward. "The Ethics Board," she stated, firmly, "has probable cause to believe Mr. Peterson attempted to manipulate property values through corrupt influence. His provisional suspension becomes permanent pending review." Glenn's face went ash white. He'd built his whole career on flash and connections, and now both were crumbling like old mortar. "Furthermore," Mayor Caldwell added, "this evidence has been forwarded to the state's attorney for potential criminal charges." I caught a glimpse of my daughter's face, a mixture of shock and something else, maybe the first real understanding of what she'd thrown away. She tried to catch the eye of her country club friends in the crowd, but they were suddenly fascinated by their phones, or the sky, or anything but her. "Now," the mayor said, gripping the cord tighter, "let's remember what real achievement looks like." He pulled. The cloth whispered down like falling sawdust, and there it was, gleaming bronze, permanent as truth. The crowd leaned forward as one, and I found myself doing the same, eager to read words I hadn't been allowed to see until this moment. The mayor's voice rang clear across the square. Samuel Whitaker, builder of homes, helper of neighbours, master of his craft. For 45 years, his hands and heart served Millbrook's families through storms and seasons. He gave shelter to those in need, work to those seeking dignity, and proof that a life well built stands forever. His workshop remains a monument to service above self. The inscription hit me like summer sun after a long winter. Everything I'd done, everything I'd believed in, there it was, carved in metal that would outlast wood. I heard sniffling in the crowd. Mrs. Thompson was dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. Even old Bill, tough as oak, looked suspiciously misty. My daughter stood abruptly, her designer heels wobbling on the grass. She opened her mouth, but the crowd's reaction stopped whatever she'd planned to say. As one, they turned their backs to her. Dozens of phones rose, not to record her shame, but to photograph the plaque, to capture the real story worth sharing. I watched her grab Glenn's arm and practically drag him away. Their footsteps faded to nothing, covered by the gentle murmur of neighbours, sharing memories of porches built, roofs repaired, kindnesses repaid. Bill's solid presence steadied me as I walked to my workshop wall. The bronze was warm under my palm, like wood that's been sitting in the sun. My fingertips traced letters that told the truth of a life spent building more than just houses. The workshop door stood exactly as I'd hung it 30 years ago, square and true as the day I'd set the hinges. Even now, I could close my eyes and feel every groove, every nail I'd driven home. Cameras clicked softly around me. The mayor had stepped back, letting the moment belong to the town and me. The microphone picked up a little feedback, reminding me it was still live, still carrying every sound across Main Street. I didn't plan what I said next. It just rose up from somewhere deep, like the smell of fresh-cut pine or the quiet satisfaction of a level beam. Respect is built, not bought. The words hung in the air like sawdust in a shaft of sunlight, simple and true as a plumb line.